Great. Please try data.
Can't hear. What has happened to the pellet gun matter in the High Court?
Sir, the judge refused to pass any order.
I know. Has anyone come to Supreme Court?
Bar Association, they have not filed any.
Therefore, nobody has filed any order,
No.
any case. And you are content to let it lie, or we should take it up?
No, we should take it up, sir.
So when will you wake up and do something? I don't know. Huh. We should wait for people to come, no? They're not yet
Yes.
come.
I'll call. Keep calling everyone.
So tell us when you want us to.
Musab, please join us. Hello. Walaikum salam.
Ashoka.
Ma'am, good evening. This is Javed Malik from KCF Pulwama. I'm BLLB third semester student.
Okay. And so you're the one who called me, Javed?
No, I didn't call you, ma'am.
No.
One of our madam,
ma'am.
Shamima ma'am, had sent us the link to attend.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So are we starting?
Yeah. We are starting. Good evening to everybody. This is Advocate Shah
Good evening.
from HRLN Srinagar.
Faisal, you expect more people to join.
Yes,
right?
yes, sir.
Hi,
Yes, sir.
Good evening, Eliza.
Good evening, sir. How are you?
I'm fine. You expect how many people to join, Faisal?
40 people, sir.
So now there are 16. So
We can wait so that there is more participation. That's why I'm open to waiting if others are not in pressure with time.
So Faisal, the first speakers are whom?
First speaker, sir, you will be sir, the first speaker. You will.
I would prefer that more speakers come in before I speak, no?
Yeah.
Right, sir.
So let 1 or 2 or 3 other speakers start and then call me a little later, maybe in about half an hour's time.
Right, sir.
But even now, wait for a while.
Yeah, let's wait for a while. It's okay.
And why don't you give a little 10-minute introduction on the kind of work done in Kashmir, no?
Right, sir. Right, sir.
Give an introduction, you speak,
Right, sir.
and give an introduction on how you've used the law in Kashmir.
Right, sir.
Let 2, 3 other speakers and then we. Okay?
Right, sir.
When it
So,
comes to 20, you can start straight away.
yes, sir. Yes, sir. I will start it. Good evening, everybody. My name is Advocate Shah Faisal. I'm presently the State Coordinator of Human Rights Law Network, Srinagar.
Faisal, your voice is not audible.
So,
Is it audible now?
It's fine.
Yes.
It's fine.
Am I audible to everybody?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, fine. So we are handling the cases of torture, custodial killing. We are defending the juveniles before Juvenile Justice Board. We are handling the cases of laborers. Briefly speaking, we filed a case. So presently, today's topic is on child rights. Before 2015, we did not have these juvenile justice boards and child welfare committees. We filed a public interest litigation before the Supreme Court of India, and that public interest litigation pertained to the implementation of Juvenile Justice Act and its rules. Public interest litigation was filed before the Supreme Court, and the Honorable Supreme Court gave us liberty in 2015 itself. It gave us liberty on the first hearing that we should approach the High Court. Consequently, one of our beloved activists who passed away, she filed a public interest litigation before the High Court in 2015. we got nearly 50 to 60 orders in that public interest litigation, ranging from constitution of these juvenile justice boards and child welfare committees. Observation homes were set up. The cases which were pending before the chief judicial magistrates, they were transferred to the juvenile justice boards. 22 juvenile justice boards were constituted and 22 child welfare committees were constituted in after the directions were passed by this High Court in our PIL. In 2018 itself, on the directions of court, ICPS scheme was launched in the state of J&K. Nearly 100 crores of rupees were released by the central and state government. 90 crores from the central government and 10 crores from state government. ICPS scheme was rolled in state. Nearly 150 odd people were invited. Their applications were invited by the government and they were appointed. Like we have DCPUs, we have these clerks for these JJPs. Members were appointed for JJPs. Chairman was appointed for CWC, and so on and so forth. So in short, it is because of that PIL, today we see a proper juvenile justice system being set up in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Hundreds of crores released by the government, by the successive governments from last 2 years. And that PIL is still pending before the High Court. We are hopeful that we have a lot more to achieve in that PIL. And that PIL is still pending before the High Court. One of the directions issued by the court was that no juvenile, irrespective of his offense, should be lodged in jail. Because in Kashmir, what we see is that these children who are whose age is like 14 or 15 years, they were normally lodged in different jails. They were not taken to these observation homes or rehabilitation centers. They were directly picked up by the police and sent to these jails or police stations. There was a clear-cut direction issued by then the Chief Justice, Justice Badr Durraiz Ahmed. He was then the Chief Justice in 2018. He issued a clear direction that no juvenile, irrespective of his offense, should be lodged in these jails. So now we see that we have nearly 3 observation homes. One at Srinagar, one in Jammu, and one more has been set up at Pulwama. Apart from these child rights cases, we are doing the cases of detainees, defending them. This year, we filed, we secured nearly 8 to 10 bail orders on behalf of these juveniles who were picked up by the police on the charges of stone pelting and various other offenses, like somebody has posted something on his Twitter or Facebook. The police, the cyber police, which haunts them, takes them into custody and lodges them, beats them. We filed nearly 8 to 10 bail applications from March till today, this year. So this is a brief introduction of the kind of the work which Jarlan Srinagar is doing. So I'll be inviting Mr. Collins, sir. He's the senior advocate and the founder director of the Human Rights Law Net. Collins, sir, does not need any introduction still. Over to you, sir. Sir, you are muted. Please unmute your mic, sir.
Faisal, let
Yes,
2 or 3 other speakers start from Kashmir.
Yes.
And
Okay,
after they start, then I could come on, okay? Say roughly
Okay,
it is about 4:15 now. So say 4:45,
Right, sir.
right? Let the Kashmir speaker speak first.
Right, sir. I'll invite first Musab, Saeed Musab. Saeed Musab.
Let me,
Saeed Musab is one of a very close and dear friend of mine. He's also taking up the human rights cases
Faisal.
at the High Court. We both defend these detainees before the High Court. Over to you, Musab.
Thank you, Faisal. The topic I have been assigned is preventive detention and child rights. Straight away going to what basically preventive detention means. Public Safety Act is the act. It has come in 1978. What is, as per the act, any person can be detained for a period of 2 years without trial. So, and you cannot have the review of your charges, what the charges are leveled against you. So till 2012, any person, despite the fact he is a minor, could be detained under this act. So in 2012, PSA was amended. PSA was amended wherein definition of a person was put in. A person was said to be a person who is above the age of 18. Thereafter, but still the law is there, but unfortunately in 2019 alone, almost 144 minors, that means minors in conflict with law, were detained under Public Safety Act. It is only then with the intervention of the Supreme Court, what has happened is that these people, some of them were left out, and Supreme Court passed away several serious orders. Thereafter, these people were started slowly in the, either their detention orders were revoked, either they were let off, and such orders were similarly passed. But unfortunately, the amnesty has again reported in 30th March 2020 report that still as on March, there were 34 still minors, juveniles in conflict with law. They were still behind bars under these preventive detention laws. So law is there, everything is there, but what is happening? The executive are using and meddling with the law in such a manner that they have found out certain loopholes in the entire act. I'd like to, we are faced with two situations here mostly, how the executive is trying to meddle with these preventive detention laws and going above and over the Juvenile Justice Act as well. So what is happening in two instances are there. One instance is that they fudge with the date of birth of these juveniles. They project them to be as majors, and thereafter they slap detention orders against them. Now the situation is that we go to court. Most of these juveniles happen to be illiterates, so they don't have these documents such as date of birth or other such document readily available with them. So it becomes extremely difficult to show to the court that these are minors and they need not to be put in with hardened criminals. Most of the times, till we do that, a lot of time is passed. As was recently also reported in the live law, 99% of the habeas corpus petitions filed in 2019 were not decided by the court. So, giving that analogy, even the 144 minors who were detained, they couldn't even approach the court because of one problem or the another, or the fact that the court isn't even deciding these habeas corpus petitions. So, they are not able to project their cases that they are minors and they need not to be put in with the hardened criminals or in the normal jail setups. So, this is one aspect, is that what the police is doing, they are fudging with their date of births. That is one. Second is, what is happening is that say a juvenile who has committed an offense, he has committed an offense when he was a minor. So what the police doesn't immediately slap with them this with the preventive detention law. They wait for the period of time they attain majority, and thereafter they put them under preventive detention using these grounds. When they were minor, they take on those grounds. And the problem is that this constitution bench judgment of the Supreme Court bars the courts from reviewing the grounds of detention. So whatever allegation they put in, even such allegations that you have committed an offense, but the fact is that he was a minor when he committed such offenses, they cannot be used in the grounds of detention, but they are being used in the ground of detention. So these are some of the problems which are continuously we are facing here. So the problem is that even if we go to the courts are not readily accepting the fact that they are minors because of the fact that they have been fudged and shown as to be majors. So these are some of the issues which we have faced personally. Now, what is happening with advent of time, what we are doing is we are putting in CWCs also as the parties in our petition. So sometimes they come to our rescue, but the fact is that usually that is not happening. So most of the times the juveniles are facing the brunt of these preventive detention laws. And in normal situation, when they have to put them, they put them for 1 year. And in extreme case or grave case, they put them behind bars for 2 years in case of maintenance of security and this thing. So precisely, laws are in place, everything is in order. But the problem is there are certain still gray areas which needs to be worked out, which could be only worked out if we approach court and seek some clarification on these points. But the problem is that the courts are not also readily interfering in these cases. So these are some of the instances wherein preventive detention laws has been used, extensively used against minors, and minors are also put in the jail system with the majors, and the end result in the society is that these people end up as hardened criminals. They come up, they face the situations. Also there were certain other crime records which the amnesty has come up, wherein minors who were put in jails and then they were harassed inside, and there were further FIRs against them where there some of the offenses they committed or some of the offenses which were committed against them. So the situation in these is very grave. Preventive detention laws are being used against them, which should have not been used. So this is some of the short summary which I could put in this little time against preventive detention and these child rights. So this is what I want to say. Faisal, you can have it.
Just 1 second, Faisal. Musaib, that is a fitting way to start this meeting.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. You came straight to the point. And this is extensive use of criminal law to treat juveniles in Kashmir as adults. And notwithstanding the intervention of the courts,
Yes, sir.
it continues as before. It's a bit more sophisticated now in the sense that the police try to fudge the age of the juveniles. But it is something on which we have to get active in doing cases after cases.
Have been doing what I'm saying is
Yeah,
precisely filed certain petitions, but they
that's
are
right.
the problem is that within 1 year of time, the preventive detention period gets over. So the courts keep on giving them time to file reply, response, rejoinder, and eventually 1 year is over, and then they say, okay, your time is over, you can go now.
Correct,
So
right?
is that hard fact that is on the fudging of date of birth and these, there are no recorded findings. Finding neither they give finding on law, neither finding on facts. These are real facts here. We are suffering these problems with regarding to preventive detention laws.
Yeah, I follow Musab. So it requires a very active intervention in between Srinagar and Delhi so that quickly matters are taken from the High Court to the Supreme Court. And we have to try to break the cycle of ineffectiveness,
Right, sir.
which the state uses very well and which we, HRL and Srinagar, has not been able to break for many years because our own responses are not as active, to put it mildly, as it ought to be. So we have to change that cycle of inaction and quickly challenge things in the Supreme Court and see if we can get something and have a landmark judgment.
We have a material on these facts of fudging of date of births and then using such grounds wherein a person was juvenile earlier, but after he becomes 18, then slapping him with the PSA.
That's
So,
right.
so we can use that material, but that will be pretty academic to directly go to Supreme Court, as we don't have someone on hand this time who can directly allege these things. However,
And do we have any actual victims who will speak out, even if they've been released? Let us,
yes, so
let
there are
us,
a number of them. There are a number of them. Even Quint has reported, Quint has done a full-fledged story somewhere in May 2018 on fudging of date of births.
right.
They
And
have
yeah,
5, 6 people who they have given their record and everything, how their date of birth was fudged and everything.
And is it possible that we can do some interviews with people also?
Yes, sir, we can do. Some of them happen to be clients. We can get them here. We can put them any questions, and even they can swear some affidavits also if they want.
Right. And we could also perhaps make a small documentary on juveniles being treated as and tortured in prison and all that. We can make a small documentary, right?
Yes, that can be done.
You could find a documentary maker who could interview these persons, and
That can be. So that's the routine thing. That's not something which is not.
so this is a fitting beginning. I must thank you, Musa. This is a fitting beginning to this meeting, because instead of talking generally in the air, you have come straight to the point of the injustice. You have also pointed out that the injustice has not been cured for a long time, maybe decades. Thirdly, you have pointed out that the legal system has not worked and is likely not to work in future unless we try something very drastic,
Yes, sir.
which we must try. And if we see whether we can succeed or fail, there's no guarantee. So that's a good beginning. So we've decided, let us say, in today's meeting, that we'll focus on juveniles in jail, juveniles under torture, and so on. And we'll look at the amnesty report, which you pointed out, right? We'll look at the amnesty report first, and we'll look at whatever documentation exists
Okay, sir.
and clients whom we can interview. And that's a very good start.
Thank
If
you, sir.
anybody else wants to comment on what Musaib said, thank you then. We'll go to the next.
We were having Dr. Roof. Dr. Roof will be joining us within 5-10 minutes. So I'll invite Musab Umar. He'll be joining us from Stockholm. Musab, are you there? Musab Umar.
Hello.
Yeah. Hi,
Hi,
Musab.
everyone. Can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yeah.
Okay, lovely. As Faisal introduced me, my name is Musab. I'm currently based in Stockholm. I work with Oxfam. I manage their fundraising operations here in Stockholm. But before coming to Stockholm, I was in Kashmir. I was working, or I'm still working on a case related to child sexual abuse. And it's a case of mass child sexual abuse, I would rather say, because the person involved is a faith healer. And according to my estimates, this man has sexually abused more than 5,000 children in the past 25 years. And it's not a small number. It may seem unrealistic, but this is the minimum estimate that I have made. Whatever the limited time I have, what I want to explain briefly in the short time is that what survivors of child sexual abuse in Kashmir basically go through. It's a vicious cycle of victimization, I would say. You become a victim, a person rapes you, and then if you dare to speak up, you are re-victimized by the judiciary, by the police, by every party involved in the case. Taking my own example, I was raped when I was 14 by this faith healer named Ajar Sheikh back in 2002. It took me another 14 years to speak up. And how it started, I was working in Afghanistan as a researcher. I was working there on radicalization and regional cooperation. It was more or less academic and policy work. So what happened there, I came across a lot of cases related to child sexual abuse, which kind of triggered what I had gone through in my childhood. I had somehow, managed to put it somewhere in my subconscious, and I was trying to overcome the trauma on my own. But when I came across, for example, the issues like bacha bozi, which literally means boy play, where these people, mostly in South Afghanistan, they bring a child, make him dance, and then they have sex with him at the end of the party. So it kind of triggered something in me. And the first thing I did, I had a friend, she was working with HRLN in Delhi. I contacted her and I told her that there is this, I didn't tell her I'm a survivor myself. I told her there is a faith healer in Kashmir who rapes children. And she was like, why aren't you doing anything about it? I said, well, that's the problem. I want to do something about it, but I don't know how to approach it because I'm not a lawyer. I have no knowledge of law. And she told me, well, there is something called POCSO in India. And even if you have a suspicion, you can just file a complaint with police and the onus will be on the person to prove himself that he's not guilty. So I came to Delhi in late 2015. I went to HRLN office in Delhi. I had a meeting with her. I spoke with some other lawyers there who were working in the office. And they told me about POCSO. When I went to Kashmir, I was put in touch with Faisal Qadri. Wasim was there. Faisal, who is our host today, he was there. And I shared my story with them. And before sharing my story with them, I also Googled this law, Child Protection Law, Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act. And I came to know that there is no such law existing in Kashmir. So that was my first question I asked Faisal Qadri and everyone in HRLN office. And unfortunately, even they didn't have a clue about it. Like nobody had actually paid any attention that this law is important and that we actually need it in Kashmir. And I remember Faisal Bhai saying that we should file a PIL about it to bring POCSO to Kashmir. This is happening in late 2015. I would say December 2015, January 2016, around that time. And I went back to my hometown. I shared my story with my parents, and I got them on board because it was important for me to have their back. So I went to the police station straight away. I spoke with the SSP, then SSP of Sopur, on my own. I visited the SSP on my own. I had a word with him. I shared my whole story, and he called in the public prosecutor at that time, and they spoke about it. And the public prosecutor was like, "I'm sorry, this case won't stand in court even for a day, even not even one hearing, because there is delay of 14 years, and how do we even expect to do anything about it?" And POCSO was not there, so that was another problem. And the main problem with my case was all the victims involved were boys. So it's not that this man was raping girls also. He was raping only boys, boys below the age of 14, all of them. And so when I got this setback, I kept going back to HRLN office. Like it was a lot of meetings with them back and forth. I was put in touch with a journalist from ETV Urdu, Rifat Abdullah. So I had a word with him as well. He wanted to get the story published, but there was no basis for the case at that time. And I went again back to the police station because I was getting very frustrated and very desperate because I wanted this man to be behind bars. Whatever the little I had known about him at that time, he was still doing it. In fact, he still does it while I'm having this chat with you guys. When I went back to Sopur, I convinced the SSP Sopur that we should at least raid his house. We should raid his house at night because most of the times he keeps children on Saturday and Sunday nights. I don't remember exactly whether it was Saturday or Sunday, but at around 2 a.m. at night, it was me, the police. Faisal, you were also there, I guess, during the raid. Faisal Qadri himself was there. I think Wasim, or maybe not Wasim, but someone else. There were 3 people from HRLN. Rifat Abdullah, the journalist, was there, myself, and the police, of course. The irony was that when we reached the place in the middle of the night in a village which is quite remote, the lights were on in his house. They were awake. They were already informed that there's going to be a raid. And before the raid, actually, police sent a kind of an agent, secret agent there, to see how many people or how many children are staying at his house that night. And the agent went quite late, actually, in the evening time, and there were 3 children at his house. But when we raided the house, there was only 1 child. And if you remember, Faisal, that child, we could tell, like, visibly he was raped. Not once, he had been raped for years and multiple times. And here comes the insensitive part of police. And I wasn't even happy with journalist Rifat. So the police guy, there is this SHO from Burma police station. He takes the child out of the house and starts interrogating him. You know, this guy is in uniform. He has an AK-47 in his hand, and it's kind of insane. He's asking the child, holding his face like this with one hand, and has a camera in phone in another hand, and he turns on the camera and he starts recording. Okay, tell me, what does this faith healer do to you? What has he done to you? Does he rape you? How many children has he raped in front of you? I mean, for God's sake, this child is traumatized. It took Musab 14 years to speak up and share his story. How are you expecting this child, you know, just in a matter of seconds, to tell you whether Sheikh rapes him or not? And then Rifat comes forward and he asks the child, he asks him in Kashmiri, which means, does this Pir Baba, does this faith healer bring forth jinn, supernatural powers, during day or during night? But he said it in a very like insensitive manner, in a very non-serious manner. Does he bring forth jinns at night or day? Like, I could sense there was not that sincerity or that sensitivity shown by the police or this one gentleman, the journalist, towards the poor child who was feeling miserable, who was confused, who was traumatized, who had been raped for years. We leave nothing. We literally got nothing from the raid. I go back home. Everyone goes back home, and in the next few days, I did everything that I could have done, and I found a child who was being taken there by his uncle. So I managed to get access to his father. I spoke with his father, and I told him that, you know, we need to do something about it. I fear your child has been sexually abused, because this child had failed in class 10 3-4 times already. And he was like, no, my child is lazy. He just doesn't pay attention to studies. I said, he doesn't pay attention to studies because I fear he is traumatized. So finally, he allowed me to speak to his child. I spoke with him, and he confessed to me that he was raped 50 times in the last 4 years. He has been visiting this faith healer. And he told me about much more gruesome stories than what I had gone through. And the father agrees to file a complaint, and that's how the case, that's how the FIR was filed. Once the FIR was filed, Sheikh was arrested. I went door to door through this child. I got to know which people currently go there. I went door to door, and I brought some 7 to 8 people on board who testified before police, and then before CJM, Chief Judicial Magistrate. That's the time I lost touch with Human Rights Law Network, HRLN. I wasn't contacted. I didn't contact them, but I wasn't contacted by them either. I had to leave. I was working in Afghanistan, then I moved to Delhi. I was in Dubai for a while. So I lost touch with the case in person as well. But before I went outside of the country, I gave the responsibility to Childline Srinagar. And Childline Srinagar, I was also put in touch with by the HRLN people. So I was in touch with Childline Srinagar. And their simple responsibility was to do at least some sort of counseling to these children. They were not criminals. They were not criminals. They were not, the cases, for example, you're fighting at the moment, they are being considered criminals by the state. But these children were not criminals. They were the victims. And the way they were treated by the police, they were treated like no any other criminals. They were treated the same way, I would say. And in my absence, it became really, really difficult for them to manage the whole trauma and manage the whole breaking the silence thing on their own. I kept in touch with them. I kept visiting Kashmir, kept giving them the hope that we will do something, we'll do something. At that time, Burhan Wani happened, and the whole state was shut for, I don't know, several months. Police took 17 months to file the charge sheet in the court. 17 months. And when I say 17 months, it's a good time for investigation, I would say. They must have done a lot of investigation, but they didn't do anything, I would say. I gave them the information about this man's background. He was kicked out of a madrasa from Gujarat. He was kicked out from a mosque in Handwara. He was kicked out from a school in Broad. He was kicked out of a mosque in Dangarpura before he became faith healer, because he was not a faith healer in the beginning. He was a madrasa student in the beginning. Then he was an imam in a mosque where he was teaching Quran as well. Then he became teacher in a school because he knew how. He's a professional child abuser. He knew how to gain access to children. So he was teaching in a school. He was teaching Arabic and Quran. And then he became an imam again in another mosque in a different village. Every time he was kicked out, people chose not to file a complaint against him because they thought it will bring bad name to the mosque, it will bring bad name to the school, it will bring bad name to the village. So they chose to stay silent and instead kick him out. But when I filed the case against him, he had already established himself as a faith healer, multiple connections. In fact, when police raided his house, within 5 minutes, the army showed up. I don't know what was the connection. I have no idea, but the army did show up, and I'm a witness.
Yeah, I remember it.
And it became kind of quite scary for us when the army showed up, and there was a bit of a confrontation also between police and army at that time. So keeping this aside, 17 months. The investigation takes 17 months, but police doesn't go to even one single place. I mean, they can easily trace the madrasa in Gujarat where he was studying. They can just give him a couple of slaps. He will tell you where exactly was he studying. And it's not difficult to get the records out and see why he was kicked out. He was kicked out because he had raped a child there as well. From Handwara Mosque, he was kicked out because he had raped children there. In school, he was kicked out. He had raped children there. So police didn't do any investigation there. They didn't go to all those places when it was super important for our case. And now we still have almost 7 people who have testified and who have been cross-examined as well in the court. But still, the case is going nowhere. 2nd of March 2016, the FIR was filed, and now we are into 2020. It's been 5 years, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Yeah, it's been 5 years. We're into our 6th year now. It's going to be 6 years soon in March 2021. And it's gone nowhere. Sheikh is out on bail, and he's raping more children while we speak. There is a child out there who is luring in pain because he was raped last night. And what are we able to do? Nothing. So apart from that, I guess I filed a petition when there was no PIL, nothing filed in the court. I, on my own, filed a petition with the help of a university professor, Yasir Abbas. I filed a petition on change.org, and the petition is still there, asking the government of Jammu and Kashmir, Mahbub Mufti, CM, to bring a POCSO-like law in Kashmir. I was in touch with child rights lawyer Anand Astana, and he was kind of supporting me as well. And then it was during the time the girl in Kotwa was raped and murdered. That kind of gave impetus to the whole thing that we should have POCSO. But until then, actually, nobody cared, and nobody had the vision that we need a strong law like POCSO in Kashmir as well, because children in Kashmir are as vulnerable as children in the rest of the country. But nobody paid attention to it. So my petition was actually the first petition demanding, at least to my knowledge, demanding POCSO like law in Kashmir. This guy has been booked under Article 377, unnatural sexual offenses.
Section 377.
Yeah, Section 377, Unnatural Sexual Offences Act. And I think the maximum punishment for him is 10 years, when in POCSO the minimum punishment is 10 years. And the children he has raped, there is death penalty now for children if you rape someone below the age of 12, and he has raped children as little as 9, 8, 10, and it's thousands, it's not even hundreds. And not only that, he forces children to rape each other. He forces, he watches it. He kind of organizes these wild little sex parties for himself, where he has like 10, 11 children at his house, and he forces them to rape each other. Then he picks up a boy which he likes the most. And what is the society doing? Nothing. I tried to raise awareness. I started a Facebook page where a couple of victims, in fact, more than a couple, they contacted me and they said they've been abused as well. One of them testified also. I spoke with different media agencies. Ironically, Greater Kashmir, the biggest newspaper in Kashmir, they refused to do a story on it. BBC did a story on it, but Greater Kashmir chose not to. I don't know why, because perhaps they find this not so selling or attractive, because this guy is not wearing uniform. This guy is not from the enemy's party. This guy is our own. He's a Muslim. He's from Kashmir, and he's an imam, and he's a faith healer. So maybe our local journalists in Kashmir also fear. Or maybe, I don't know, they think this will bring bad name to Kashmir.
I'm from Greater Kashmir. I have worked in Greater Kashmir for 16 years. My name is Javed Malik. I was working as a senior editor. Can you tell me who refused to do the story? Can you tell me the name of the reporter whom you contacted?
Javed,
yes, I can. Can we do that later? We can get in
Wait.
touch.
You get in touch with me.
Javed, just wait for a while. Let him finish. Give him time to finish, and then we'll go to you immediately after that.
Right,
But let him finish, please.
Okay.
Thank you, Javed.
Perfect. Thanks, Colin. So my problem with the issue is that whenever there is something which is non-political, people don't pay attention to it. Like Asifa rape and murder, it became so big because there was a communal angle given to it. POCSO was brought to Kashmir because this poor girl was raped, but POCSO was not brought to Kashmir when I was raising my voice along with all the people who were raped. But that was, since that person was our own, that's why I believe, this is my belief, nobody supported me. At that time, also before POCSO was brought in Kashmir, I contacted Hilal Bhatt. He was the chairperson of ICPS, which had been recently kind of launched in Kashmir. Integrated Child Protection Scheme. Some things have changed. I'm not up to date with the whole thing, but I on behalf of Hilal Bhatt, he told me to visit their office, Child Welfare Committee or something, their office in Baramulla. I went there with a written piece. I gave it to them and I told them my story and where the case stands. I asked for their intervention, but nothing, zero result. They didn't do anything. They simply told me that this case is sub judice and we can't do anything. But my point was not that, of course, this case is sub judice. I've been fighting this case on my own, but what's their role? Like, there are still children who are being abused by this man. And the irony, the bail order, if you read it, there is nowhere mentioned that until this case is solved or something, this guy cannot have access to children. Like, there needs to be some sort of spying on him where it's to be made sure that this guy doesn't keep children at his house. Like, if even people visit him for faith healing, fair enough, it's his business. That's what he does for bread and butter. let people visit his house, but people can't visit him with children or leave children at his house. There needs to be something like that, like the condition before you give him the bail, because it's a big case, you know, it's children involved in it. And if someone has raped children for 25 years, and how I'm saying 25 years, because we have a victim who was raped in 1998, we have a victim who was raped in 2000, we have a victim who was myself raped in 2002, and then there is a victim who was raped in 2006, 2009, 2012. So we have, at least for like 14 years, we have a documented record that this man has raped children over a period of 14 years. But according to my estimates, he's been doing it way before that. He's done it somewhere in 90s, early 90s, when he started it, when he was kicked out of the madrasa. So a person with a history, a person who is a serial child abuser, the court tells him, okay, you can take the bail, you're free to go, and they don't put any conditions on it. The only condition is perhaps you have to ask court's permission if you want to go out of the state. This is not fair, and nobody actually did anything with regards to it. And since POCSO was implemented in Kashmir in 2018, it didn't help my case, because laws don't, you know, apply retrospectively, if that's the correct term. So I got in touch with an NGO, Health Foundation, recently. And there I met an advocate Altaf Khan. He works in High Court Srinagar or Lower Court Srinagar, I'm not sure. And we had a chat about POCSO in Kashmir, and I discussed my case with him. And he told me that, okay, we need to do something about it. I told him, can we not file something, a PIL or something, asking the High Court that at least the pending cases in Kashmir on CSA, they should be brought under the provisions of POCSO, because this is important. Like, it's children anyways. If POCSO was applied to the rest of the country in 2012, at least do something that some of the provisions of POCSO are retrospectively applied to the cases pending in Kashmir. So we filed a PIL a few months ago, and the next hearing is scheduled in a few days, I guess. Faisal, you may be knowing it, you were present there when the last hearing took place. So the demand is simple. All I want from the court, the kinds of relief, like implement POCSO, like like properly. Because if you are even bringing a law to Kashmir, you need to train the police how to deal with children when something like this comes up. You need to have counselors. You need to have a lot of bases covered before you can roll out a full-fledged law. And that's what I'm demanding in the petition. I'm like, there needs to be some sort of training with the law enforcement agency, so that nobody goes to a house, raids a house, and holds a child like this and starts interrogating him right there. And that child is being, by the way, that child is being still abused. He is still being raped. He is still spending nights at Sheikh's place. And I'm not just making some lame allegations here. It's a fact, and it's true. It's true. You tell me, Faisal, do you think it's not happening? Because nobody went to this child's house, nobody counseled his parents, nobody supported his parents, and, you know, somehow gave them the confidence that if they come on board, if they file a case, we will support them, we will help the child with education, we will do, like, we're doing a lot, I would say, when it comes to children who are in conflict with law. But what are we doing with regards to children who need protection, who need care and protection? That's my question.
Yeah, Musaib, I must say, this is the most horrifying and amazing story of child sexual abuse. And you've told it, you know, straight on. And it shows a complete breakdown of a system, including the legal system. What I want to ask you is, when the matter went to the criminal court, right, ultimately,
yeah,
what is the stage of that case? Has evidence been taken of the children? Has any evidence, prosecution evidence, been led in the criminal court?
Yeah. So it's out of out of the 8
Witnesses.
8 witnesses, but there are total 14 witnesses, but 8 of
Eight
them
have
are the
been.
victims. 8 of them are the victims, and out of 8, 7 have testified. One dropped out. One dropped out because the case took too long, and he has family pressure. The poor guy is as old as me now, and he has a family.
Right.
His wife, has a child. So it's difficult for him to come forward.
Right.
But 7 of us have testified.
Right. And who is the lawyer handling the case?
It's a
Uh,
public prosecutor.
it's the public prosecutor, but in between, I involved private lawyers. Initially, I had advocate Mushtaq Dor from High Court. Then I wasn't satisfied, so I brought on board. I actually contacted HRL in Srinagar again. So I asked Faisal Qadri to take this case on. So he handed it to Wasim, Advocate Wasim, one of his lawyers. And then I think Wasim left HRL or something, so it became a bit of a mess. And then this whole coronavirus thing happened. So Wasim was taking part in the hearings. The last hearing that took place, it was Wasim who was kind of present there on behalf of us. And then there was a local lawyer in Sopor who was giving me dates and keeping me updated about the case. But then when I met Advocate Altaf, I asked him for his help if he can take this case. And apart from that, there is a law firm, I Pro Bono, if you've heard of them.
Yes.
They're based in Delhi as well. So they've been involved since 2018, and like they've taken the responsibility that I was doing, coordinating and keeping track of everyone and everything. So now iProbono is doing that.
Right, because it's a failure on all sides, including failure on HRLN's side to follow through with the case, frankly. And it's an amazing case. And what we'll do is we'll try and take stock and get back to you. May not be today because time is limited, but we'll try and see how we can help also. But it's a failure of the HRLN organization that initiated the case, or at least was at some stage active. And it's a totally shocking case because, frankly speaking, the use of constitutional law and criminal law remedies, even in the absence of POCSO, would have been very effective, even in the absence of POCSO. So it's not as if the absence of the law cripples the prosecution of this person. Giving bail to him, for example, should have been cancelled long back, and he should have been sent back to prison. And it's just totally, the facts that you said, one after the other, are totally shocking, and it's a total breakdown of the law, of the whole system, and particularly of our own organization. So we'll come back to this, Musab, at some stage. Thank you for saying that.
One small example here. Since I was closely working with iProbono on this case, I asked them, is there no way we can file an application for cancellation of bail? So there was one incident when Wasim was in court, in Sopor court, along with an intern who was working with iProbono. So she was a girl, Wasim, and Sheikh's brother, inside the court, Sheikh's brother comes to them and points his finger like this to Wasim, like it's a matter of one bullet, so you better watch yourself, basically. And that was the point. That was the point when Wasim could have spoken to the court about it, but he chose not to. He chose not to. That was the time when we could have, even if there was delay in filing cancellation of bail application, he could have done that, but I don't know, he didn't do it. And iProbono has been chasing him, asking him to come up with something, like write an application, or like something. We need some facts and we need some witnesses. The girl was ready to testify that this man threatened him inside the court premises. And Wasim could have testified himself that he threatened me, his brother threatened me. And his brothers are known goons. They were convicted for murder, and they were in jail for many years before they were released on good behavior or something like that. So it's a criminal family, and
So, Musab, we'll get back to you because the time is short actually for the remaining speakers.
absolutely.
But can bail be cancelled? I suppose can be cancelled even today, because after he got bail, he continued raping children, right?
Of course, the
Yeah,
only
that's ground enough for him for bail to be cancelled.
I understand, but where will I find those victims? That's the biggest problem. It's small children being raped at the moment.
All right.
The onus should not be on the children, but it should be like the law needs to take some things in hand, like someone needs to take control of the situation. And that's why in the bail order, there
Yeah.
should have been clearly mentioned that he can't have access to children. And if any
Yeah,
children,
Musab, I got that. What we'll do is perhaps we'll organize a separate Zoom meeting only on the case to have a little discussion to see where we can get. Because you obviously need to do something really dramatic in terms of the investigating agency as well.
Yeah.
Because the police should have on their own actually moved for cancellation of bail, which they've not done.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's get back to you again, Musab, okay?
Thank you, Musab.
It's very, very, but thank you very much for speaking up the way you did. And Javed wanted to say something, Javed Malik.
Yeah, Mustab, I have worked in Greater Kashmir for 16 years. I was working there till March 2020. I'm a law student right now. I don't know whom you have got in touch with in Greater Kashmir. You can
Uh,
get my number and get speak to me. And media in Kashmir is not only about Greater Kashmir. There are a lot many media houses which can
Previous,
do the story. I really want to do your story. I salute your courage for speaking so boldly. And I'm sorry if media has let you down. Believe me, get in touch with me after the seminar is over. This webinar is over. We'll see what best we can do as journalists for you.
Perfect. Thanks. I appreciate it.
Initiate contact. Thank you, Musab.
You're welcome.
Now I'll invite Miss Safina Nabi. She's a journalist and she'll speak about a rise of sexual abuse cases in Kashmir.
What's your name?
Thank you, Faisal. I might not be able to come on the video because my internet is slow and the connection might drop. Is that okay?
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, okay. So basically, I am a working journalist in Kashmir and I work independently. I majorly cover gender and social justice with the focus majorly on the happenings on the current situation in Kashmir, basically. Uh, so. To speak about the rise of child sexual abuse, it's been almost 2 to 3 months that I'm working on a project where I actually want to do a story, kind of a full-fledged story where I could get the numbers from all the districts in Kashmir and try to come on a conclusion if
Safina?
am I audible?
Yeah, you are audible. Please
Yeah,
continue.
just connection just dropped. We know we live in a conflict zone, and Kashmir has, as a conflict zone, led to many socio-economic problems, and violations of children's rights is actually one of them. Despite the fact that we do have the POCSO, the child rights law with us, but it still has those loopholes, according to my understanding that I've been reading from past 2-3 months. There has been a noticeable spike in the crimes against children, including the violations of, the protection of children from sexual offenses like rape, sexual assault, etc. And it's been quite dramatic. So if we take the data from 2014 till 2020, so since 2014, there were around 210 cases of child sexual offenses that were actually under POCSO registered with the different child welfare committees in Srinagar and other other districts. But since 2015 till 2018, there was a sharp dip in the cases. So from 210-11, the cases dropped down to 20, 25, 30. And this just spiked my mind that why is there's such a dip in the cases? I mean, was there really something really great that happened from the administration, or was there really something an organization on ground who were working? And I started to sort of, comprehend and analyze the data, and in a way, get to its root. I mean, what is actually happening? When I actually got in touch with the different social welfare committees within the different districts, so when I got in touch with different districts and the child welfare committees in Kashmir, I could actually come to the conclusion that there was nothing actually happening on ground. So basically, since 2015 to 2019, 2018, the condition, in Kashmir was so that either people were not able to, file the cases or do anything about it, or the administration was not doing anything in terms of campaigning or sort of actually going, into the matter and sort of trying to control it. Uh, Luckily, after 2018, in 2018, the POXO was actually implemented in Kashmir after the gruesome murder and rape of Katwa, a girl. And it was at that point of time that they actually started ICPSs in Kashmir. Now there are so many different factors where we actually have to understand, was the data reliable then, or is it now reliable? I am really, sort of in between, because if we will try to understand that the data was not actually diluted, or that this data that is currently available with us is not, is in a way showed in a way that there is a spike. Uh, so there we need to come to a conclusion. For example, so there are two factors that are responsible for it. That is actually my understanding about it. So when the cases were dropping, actually the government was not doing anything, and they were not actually registering the cases. And then when ICPS started to work in Kashmir in 2019, they actually started working in 2018 February, and from that day there were different organizations who were set up in different and there were actually cells who were that were set up in different districts, and who could actually register the cases that were coming under the POXO. But in 2019, the total number of cases registered within Kashmir were around 166. But there are two things now that we need to consider. One is that amid that clampdown that happened after the abrogation of 317, if there are 166 cases that were registered, why were there not cases registered between 2014 till 2018? One. Second, if there were 166 cases amid the clampdown where no communication, nothing was working at all, can we just imagine where is this society going, and what would be the actual number of the sexual abuses that would be happening with children? And this year, since pandemic has started, there are around 200, there are like 250 plus cases that have been registered from March till September, and these are all the cases from different districts, and they have been registered under POXO. So amid the pandemic, there were, I mean, such a drastic and exponential spike in the cases. Obviously we come to this point that there is a lockdown outside, people do not have to do anything, and it's an established fact also that whenever there is a situation or the turmoil happening in Kashmir, any kind of a violence increases, and similarly the violence or the violation of the rights with the children also sort of spikes up. But always be it administration or be it the law enforcing agencies, all their focus is not, or even those NGOs who are working on ground, their focus is not on what is happening with the children when it comes within the society, like the socio-economic problems that are happening, but their focus is only on those cases where there is a tiff between judiciary and the law. So uh, so there is this a sort of a culture also in Kashmir, where we also try and say that if there is a sexual abuse happening, we should not even explain it to our parents, because there is so much taboo associated with it that even we even think that it's shame even to think about it. So there needs a lot of campaigning around that also. So yes, there is an exponential spike in the cases, and specifically including including those violations that are happening around POXO or within the POXO. And I mean, of course, the children in Jammu and Kashmir are not provided with the best exposure about the forms of child sexual abuse, due to which many victims are not able to report the abuse. Also, it has become extremely difficult to capture the data on sexual abuse, because all the enforcing agencies are directly or indirectly associated with different political or other happenings that are happening. So the sexual abuse, because of the actions against the offense, is confined to the registration of an FIR just only. Children are sexually abused, or they are kind of on verge of a mental breakdown, and there is a desperate need of psychological support and mental health counseling support in Kashmir, and which is also not there, which is also not happening. I personally know a case where a 17-year-old boy recently like raped a 7 or 8-year-old boy. After the DNA testing or the first medical examination was happened, uh, the boy was sent into the juvenile home, but within 10 days that boy was granted bail. But according to law, he should have been sent to the home for at least 6 months, where his counseling, of course he was also a minor, but then his counseling and other things would have happened, but that is not happening. So if something like this is happening, which means there is something lacking in the law in itself. And as society, we're not able to accept it, that there is something like child sexual abuse happening within the society, which is a very very major obstacle when it comes to reporting, or when it comes to actually helping those victims to deal with it. I think the lack of awareness and the clear guidelines on the child sexual abuse in JNK also leads to insensitive handling of such cases, and which is also not only sort of making them more vulnerable, but also they are just traumatizing the victims more and more. I think that's it from my side.
Thank you, Safina. That was very interesting. Thank you, Safina.
Thank you, Safina. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Javed Ahmad. He is the assistant professor of Kashmir University and teaching the students of Masters of Social Work. His topic is experiencing childhood in a conflict situation. Over to you, Javed.
Thank you, Faisal, and thank you all the panelists and participants, Colin sir and many others. I know. I hope I am audible, clear. Yeah. So yes, it's a very interesting theme, and especially when it comes to children, and that too in a conflict situation, the children who are experiencing conflict. In fact, a lot of issues have been identified, and as Faisal also, gave a short summary of what HRLN is doing in Kashmir and other parts, and also the survivor and other advocates and many speakers talked about. But the point actually which I want to make very clearly is from a very academic point of view, than going into an activist's or advocate's stance. But from a researcher's point of view, the issues which were highlighted by many speakers, like for example, when it comes to a conflict situation in Kashmir, and you put children on one side and conflict on the another side, so it obviously conflict will expose children to lot many risks and vulnerabilities, and out of them many are direct, and much more is also indirect in terms of so many issues, whether it is mental health or psychosocial issues, or issues like abuse or insensitivity of the state, uh, in terms of not having appropriate structures or mechanisms or legislations or protective systems that could prevent these abuses, or those that could prevent children from falling into the net of vulnerabilities or risks. So I would actually try to put that into perspective, that it's very important to focus also on children per se. I mean, that's why I said I would be more academic in a way, that we need not to, forget that children are also active beings, and we cannot just see them as victims only. But I was very happy that the tone was set, that how Museb, related his story in a way that, it looks very courageous, but we just forget that it took him 14 years to come up. So why? So imagine how many children fail to report it, and as Safina was also rightly pointing out, that there is that culture of silence around abuse, or especially issues which are very sensitive, or which are one for example could be the fear of the state. Another is when it comes to stigma, or issues of shame. So I think that is where the role of all stakeholders, including teachers, lawyers, or state, executive or judiciary or police, and many other actors, who have to come, who have to understand that children are also active beings. It's not that they are, they are in a cocoon and nothing affects them, or as if they are passively into a situation where they do not understand what is happening around them. But I think that is where the role has to be of all the stakeholders, and especially maybe I can take my role, like as a teacher, what is my role? And if you look at the education system of our state, of this region, that again could be utilized in making things happen manner. So children having that agency, having that capability, or enhancing their capacities, that could come obviously from schools, within our families, wherein parenting is also important, but also the role of teachers is could also be pointed out, wherein we could work together in our different capacities, and empower those children who face abuse at different levels. I know, especially in a conflict situation, which we are all aware of, the direct violence or the indirect effects of violence. So emphasizing that children do have a voice, and that uh, need to be listened to first of all, and maybe made that when we call right, their right to participation, their right to make a decision, and involve them in those in creating those preventive structures around us. So it shouldn't be that way, that we just this cage this child into some victimhood, where from he or she is not able to come out. And I think that is actually my emphasis, that some sort of change in the perspective is very important, even when it comes to a lawyer, when it comes to an activist or an advocate, or especially uh, and also very importantly when it comes to the state. And when state comes into play, it is, I have been into research, studying how state and childhood actually is related in the context of Kashmir. In fact, my whole MPhil and PhD research is on this, that how state intervenes into the lives of children in Kashmir. So it takes many different roles. For example, state in Kashmir, on one point, it will be a perpetrator of violence. And on another point, it will be a provider of welfare. And at another point, it partners with international organizations or non-governmental organizations. So it has a dialectical paradox in its roles perfectly, and that is where children actually suffer. So that's why we may have to advocate also that how we can, take state on in a way to kind of force it to invest into children, invest into childhood. For example, take the case of this ICPS. When 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 the recruitment to ICPS took place, I maybe some of the members could also be here who are in ICPS. I don't know, but generally speaking, it was a open recruitment, open in the sense they did not take into consideration the eligibilities or specializations for example, the case of child protection officer or a counselor. And in many districts, you have a child protection officer who has a degree in history, for example, PG in history, or PG in Persian even, PG in Urdu. So that's a minor thing. But when it comes to ICPS and children, and I mean, then where do these guidelines go? If you look at ICPS guidelines, if you look at many even judicial orders, wherein it has been emphasized that you have to take those people into the system who have the knowledge of child psychology or child development or other sensitivity, so that you have a sensitive force around you, whether in police, whether in CWC or JJBs or even DCPU. So that way, I think that's where that's very important. And maybe I'm taking this to another level in a way that our approach has to be comprehensive. Our approach has to be holistic, wherein we could include the work of all stakeholders, integrating our works, integrating our energies, and working in synergy. And as rightly pointed out by someone, that the training and how insensitively what Muse was talking about, how a journalist, how insensitive was the journalist, how insensitive was the police officer, and many other stakeholders or workers. So that's where the role is on the training, capacity building, and changing our perspectives, and also putting children at their proper places, like giving them that voice, giving them that restoring their agency. They are not just victims, they are also fighters, and they are also active beings, and they need to be given that identity. And you will realize that this culture of silence may break by restoring that agency to children. So this is something which I wanted to say, that yes, our work is multifaceted. I mean, we need to come together, and a platform like this, wherein HRLN could take a lead, bring these stakeholders together on a platform and work together, as rightly pointed out by Colin sir, that how things can be shaped up. And as he suggested that we should have a separate, I mean, interaction on the this massive mass child sexual abuse case. I think this is how things could actually happen, coming together, changing our perspectives, and broadening our base. I think that's the key, and that is what could lead us to the 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 real, I should say, development in terms of child rights or child protection. So my area of research or specialization, I'm still a student, kind of trying to, I mean, bring some change into my own, I mean, sphere of influence, though that which is very limited. For example, we teach in a university, but when I teach a course on child protection, so we try to bring uh, people around, and I think therein I can take some lead, like bringing people on board, and for special lectures, and trying to sensitize at least that group of students at our social work department. And that is I think that is the human resource we have at present, and who could later on go to these organizations or to these DCPU units or CWCs and JJBs. And I think that is the point I was trying to make, that bringing that sensitivity and that capacities within our workforce who work for children. And I think working for children is also important, but working with children is very important again, wherein that I said, I mean, taking children along, looking at their perspectives, how do they think about their life, and especially in a conflict situation, when children are exposed to such trauma, such vulnerabilities and risks. I think children also innovate and are more resourceful in such situations. So we should try to capitalize that, and also bring that resourcefulness into our policy, into our approach, and it could pave a way, and which could enlighten our own, uh, own path. And I think that's it from me. But I am ready to volunteer for any other events, for any other work, and for children, for rights of children in J&K. Thanks a lot, Faisal and many other people who organized this event. Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Faisal.
Yeah, thank you, Javed.
Thanks.
Now I would like to invite Miss Aliza. She's a lawyer and child rights activist. Her topic is child abuse and POCSO. Over to you, ma'am. Miss Elisa. I think we have lost her connection.
Call her on the phone, Fred.
Yeah,
No, no, I'm there. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Please continue, ma'am.
Okay. My internet out here a little weak, so I will be talking without the video. So please, I apologize for that.
No problem, ma'am. Please continue.
Okay, thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Before you begin, I wanted to ask you whether you heard the story of Musab Umar, of his own abuse and how children are abused in Kashmir. Did you hear that testimony?
I completely heard everything very well, and
Right.
I believe his story. And I could connect his story to a lot of the survivors that I have worked with. For example,
in Kashmir.
Sorry?
Just 1 second, Elisa. So I'm just saying this so that after you speak about the things that you're prepared to speak about, I would like you to think a little bit, and all the participants to think, how can we play, how can HRLN play a role in Kashmir on cases of child sexual abuse? You already heard of his story, right? And to me, I was very upset and disturbed because it showed the failure of HRLN to follow through with a case of importance, of significance. So how can we reorganize and what role can we play in Kashmir to ensure that these kind of cases are taken up very actively? So keep that in mind, Elisa. And for all who will speak after Elisa, please keep that in mind also.
I completely believe in his story, and in a lot of ways, I could relate his story to a lot of the survivors that I have worked with. For example, in East Delhi, one of our survivor who was about 16 years old had an epilepsy, and she was taken to a tantric by her mother on the advice of their neighbors, and she was brutally raped by the tantric. As a result, she struggled with her life for about 3 months, and she passed away before she could come and testify. So definitely the brutal rape, the horrendous stories, I can definitely relate. And I think, Musab, I would say all of us needs to own up. I will own up your story. In our country, half of our children's population is already abused based on the survey that our government has done. So with pandemic, as you all know, the pornography traffic was increased by 200, and the demand of that pornography was towards more children. They want children. So a lot of the pedophiles are online. In our country too, in Bihar, I keep getting a lot of calls from across the country about the increase of abuse. And I could definitely relate. It feels very heavy. As I talk about this, it makes me feel so heavy. I don't know how to say. As a lawyer, after working on the issues of child sexual abuse, my perspective to the judiciary, my perspective to the administration of our system has totally changed, and I have no words. I have no words. As we've talked a lot about, awareness, I think even as lawyers, we need to look when we do child sexual abuse cases, We need to look at each cases from a different lens because we're dealing with people's emotions that is so shameful to talk about culturally. We don't talk about sex and sexuality at home. Rape as such is such a shaming thing. It's such a judging thing. It's so judgmental. And as a result, the victims get self-blame on it. I've seen a lot of my survivors right now, even now, they're going through a, societal tendency is so heavy. Societal tendency, behavioral issues is so heavy. And so I could so relate to you, Musab. I don't know where to begin. I don't know where to begin and how to begin. Yes, our country, after the study of 2007, wherein 52.22% of our children are sexually abused, we finally brought in a law in 2012, November 14. I had the chance to handle the first case that was registered on 2012, 1st of December from the Lodi police station. It is such a struggle because the police, Musab has mentioned about our investigating agency. The first who comes in first contact with the survivors as legally required by the when the survivors comes to report. Yes, there's a big loopholes. At the same time, as I train the police, when I talk about aggravated penetrative sexual assault, when I talk to them having a class, when I talk to them about vagina, penis, they get so culturally, they get so ashamed. They put down their head and they're looking at me, ma'am, but the law requires for our survivors to say that his penis entered my vagina. But that is the kind of awareness, that is the kind of perspective, the change in, paradigm of shift that we need to have, starting from the lawyers to the police, to the doctors, to the judiciary, to the child welfare committees, to the JJP, and even to the civil society in general. We really need to work on this. I have managed 172 child sexual abuse from 2012 through 2017. 30% of the cases that I handled are, again, which is even more sadder part, is incest case, wherein children are raped in their own homes by their own family members, by their own brothers, by their own fathers, stepfathers, chacha, chachi. I had a case wherein a child of 12 years was raped by her chacha, by her uncle, mom's sister, by her grandfather, by her brothers. So can you imagine the kind of horrendous situation this children walks in? It is so it is very painful, and I could so relate with Musab's case, with all the stories that I have walked with. POCSO, again, we see the power dynamics. If we read the law very clearly, there's a missing link also. The power dynamics is also not mentioned in the law. The rigorous psychological counseling is also missing in the law, because at the end of the day, how do we help? If we want to help the child very effectively, helping the child to come out of that trauma, to come out of that shame, that self-blame, that judging, we need to help. The justice system needs to help. It's not only about the legal, the conviction that I am worried, but we also need to help the child to come out of that trauma and look beyond the past without feeling shameful, without feeling judgmental. So that is where we, all of us as lawyers, as social workers, even when a child is, for example, I don't know what happened, the system in Kashmir, but when the child comes to the police station, the police first need to keep certain information about his name, his phone number, his contact number, and have to talk to the child without the police uniform. Then thereafter, taking a note after that, it has to be in the language that the child says, not what the police understands, but what the wording should be the child's language or the complainant's language. And this is a huge problem at the time of trial, because a lot of times the police just write what they want and what they understand, not what the child says, not what the complainant says. Thereafter, when the child goes to the doctors have to mention about the emotions of the child. How did the child look? Which is such, again, a missing link. When I look at the MLC report, many doctors do not write about how the child looked. The child looked fearful, the child looked sad, the child looked this thing. Their emotions need to be mentioned in the MLC report, which is missing in a lot of the MLC that I have seen. Then thereafter, when the child goes to the judiciary for their 164 statement to be recorded before the magistrate, it has to be a lady magistrate. The child do not have to wait. A lot of times, to my experience, we wait for 2-3 days. And most of the time, it is again a male person. How can a female, having such a gender inequality in our country, how it's so difficult for the child to say how he raped, and as a result, there is always, the child have to save his reputation in a way that is why a lot of times the defense lawyer taken advantage of that, because the child is unable to say. The child does not mean to lie, but the child means to save his face. As a result, there is that psychological trauma. As a result, the language becomes a little lesser than what actually happened a lot of times, to my findings. So when the child comes to trial, the lawyers, as a lawyer, we need to meet the children before they go to the court. How to help them face the defense lawyer at the time of cross-examination, without putting a words in their mouth, but rather help them to come out with the truth, with the facts, in a way that actually happened and will help them lead to conviction. So even for lawyers, for example, I met one of a survivor for 24 times before she went into the trial, because as a result of the gang rape that she had gone through, her stories are all bits and pieces here and there. And so we have to, as lawyers, we have to help them join the stories one by one. Okay, so this is what happened. This is how it happened. We have to help them join the stories so that they can go and elaborate their stories chronologically to the judge and help them face the defense lawyer at the time of cross-examination. The POCSO, at times, the POCSO is a little, haywire. The role of police is clearly mentioned, but again, it's haywire. The role of magistrate, the role of child welfare committee, the support person, which is again, HRLN can come in and can come and play as a big role. If the support person is assertive, is somebody who's efficient to deal with the children, half of your case is done. So I would suggest Kashmir HRLN to look for support, start awareness, start equipping them with the law. Again, I think the HRL in Kashmir can start working with the schools. The NCPCR, you can contact the NCPCR, and just out of that, pandemic happened, so we postponed it. The NC is very keen on starting something at Jammu and Kashmir, Srinagar. So please contact NCPCR, start an awareness program at the school level. A lot of the cases that I had came from Teach for India, because Teach for India people goes out for tuition to the children in the evening at the MCD schools. At the time of doing their tuitions, the child said, you know what, I was raped at home. I'm raped at home. I don't want to go home. A lot of things, information came from Teach for India. So those are the innovative things that HRLN can contact with NCPCR, Teach for India, all the schools, start training the police, empower them. So those are the things that you guys can do under POCSO. Start training the Child Welfare Committee, the way they take down the note. Most importantly, I think we have to really create the spirit of compassion and empathy and hearing each children as per what they say, not what I want to hear, not what we want to hear, but how are they feeling? Because mostly, it's emotions, it's somebody's emotions. So that's something that we need to keep at the back of our mind while we try to help the survivors of child sexual abuse. Due to the paucity of time, I will end here. I'm happy to come alongside in whatever capacity that I could. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I would like to invite Dr. Colin Gonzalez. He is the Senior Advocate of the Supreme Court of India. Over to you, sir. Sir, please unmute your mic.
Yeah, thank you, Faisal.
Thank you.
First of all, I'd like to just say a few things about what Elisa said about the NCPCR. This is the place where the chairperson is that Kangu fellow. What's his name? The chairperson?
Chairperson is Konongo.
Correct. Correct. Now, I think the model that we follow in the rest of the country may not work in Kashmir, because as you know, a case has been filed against him in which I was a lawyer, in which he played a role which, anyway, let's not talk in particular terms, but it's quite possible that sometimes, generally speaking, institutions may have people who, though functioning well on child rights generally, in general situations, when it comes to Muslims and a situation regarding Muslims, they become a little different. There's a case against him which has been filed against him, and the High Court has made an order serving notice on him.
Oh.
Because he asked for an FIR to be filed against the alt news person, Zubair, who's one of the leading persons in the country exposing fake news. So please, as far as Kashmir is concerned, we cannot recommend that this organization be involved at all because of its political orientation, at least of the chairperson. Now,
okay, thank you.
Yeah. Now, what we are trying to do by this webinar, and the webinar we had a few days ago, day before yesterday to be exact, is that we want to revamp HRLN Kashmir. And we understand the failings and the mistakes made over many years. And although we've done some good work, in a webinar day before yesterday, somebody came on and said HRLN Kashmir is defunct. And rather than sweep such a statement under the table, it's better to accept and say, all right, perhaps even if you do good work, somebody may say you're defunct, but we should take that comment seriously and we want to seriously revamp HRLN Kashmir. We want to recruit young men and women lawyers who will be very bold in the doing of cases. From the leadership of HRLN Kashmir, I can't, I'm speaking for the leadership because I'm just the founder member and an active litigator. I would say that HRLN will give these young lawyers full backing, and there will be no retreat or no compromise, even in cases where the person's accused not only of sexual abuse but also of torture, execution, disappearances. And even if those persons are civilians or those persons are, in uniform, the commitment that we have is that we will enforce the law to the maximum extent, and we will not ask young lawyers who join us in Kashmir to withdraw, go soft, and so on. What, notwithstanding any pressure, we will proceed in a very disciplined manner and a very principled manner, and we'll proceed notwithstanding the status of the person who is arraigned as an accused person. That's the commitment that we make. So, to all those present today, please think about the kind of persons that we should take. We want people with a social perspective, and we want people who are determined to change the situation in Kashmir, because the legal system is defunct, totally defunct. And for many, many, many years, the whole legal apparatus going right up to the Supreme Court, when it comes to cases on Kashmir, is a dismal failure. So when my friends in Kashmir say that you are talking about an Indian system, and it's an Indian system which doesn't care about Kashmir, I understand what they are saying. I understand very clearly what they are saying. Nevertheless, we want to see whether it is possible, by trying very hard and relentlessly, to do a series of PILs, public interest litigation, both in the High Court and in the Supreme Court, and also to do criminal cases in the valley and elsewhere. I want to give you an example of Manipur, where it was impossible, just like Kashmir, it was impossible to do cases when the army or the police executed somebody in cold blood. So fake encounters, there were hundreds of attempts made to do PILs, and the PILs were invariably dismissed. Or something like, pay 5 lakh rupee compensation. You've killed somebody, pay 5 lakh rupee compensation. And as they did in Musab's case, you go to the criminal court and you fight your case there for the rest of your life, And then once the cooperative body, a collective body of the parents and wives of the disappeared, filed a case in the Supreme Court, meticulously documented the executions and killings, and by luck it came before a very good bench which said that we want to do a preliminary inquiry before we assume that what you're telling us is correct. And Musab, I'd like you to know that was also a case where huge delays had taken place, 30-year delays had taken place. So it covered the killing of 1,524 persons for the last 3 decades. And the court said, we don't know if this data you're giving us is correct, but we'll refer to you to a special committee headed by Justice Hegde, former judge of the Supreme Court. And on the committee was also Lindo, who was the election commissioner for some years, and the Director General Police of Karnataka earlier. This committee went to Imphal and interviewed the victims and took evidence. I'll cut a long story short, took evidence of the officers against whom allegations were made. And that cross-examination and that evidence is worth reading. But at the end of the day, they came to a conclusion unanimously that all the 5 sample cases they took were killings in cold blood. They were not genuine encounters. All the persons killed had nothing to do with terrorism as alleged. And finally, that all the persons killed had in fact no previous criminal background. And I give you the example of Javed, a 11-year-old boy who was reading to his grandmother in the morning the newspapers because her eyes were weak. And a combined force of the army and the police, commandos of the police, broke into his house, asked him if his name was Javed. And when he said his name was Javed, they caught him by the collar without any further questioning to see whether this Javed was same as the Javed they wanted. And he was an 11-year-old boy, so they could obviously find out. Dragged him down to the garden, shot him dead in front of his family who were looking through the windows of their house, and then put a 9mm pistol in his hands and then came up with a story that he was a dreaded terrorist and he was killed in an encounter because Javed had opened fire on the police. So this committee concluded that these were fake encounters, recommended that the court should proceed, and the court went ahead and it's a very important judgment which I want all of you to see. It's a judgment EVAM, EEVAAM versus Union of India. And there are two judgments of the Supreme Court coming one after each other. And the Supreme Court holding that it didn't matter if a person had a uniform, criminal law would apply evenly for those with uniform and even civilians. You will be taken to the ordinary criminal court, FIRs will be registered, charge sheets will be filed, the trial will proceed, convictions will follow, and the person will be put in jail. The trials are now going on. The CBI is investigating, and I think something like 11 or 12 charge sheets had been filed, and the trial is about to begin. What I'm saying is that the legal system is as bad as everyone thinks it is. It used to be better when I started practice. Now it is a mess. And it is declining from day to day. Notwithstanding that, there are very fine judges within the system who feel like we feel, who think like we think. And if a case comes before them, as I hope cases from Kashmir will come before judges, I think they will stand up and do what's right, notwithstanding pressure brought to bear on them. So I agree with my friends in Kashmir and my lawyer friends particularly who say that it's a waste of time, trying to get justice from the Indian courts. And they give so many examples. The pellet gun case, which is before the Supreme Court, has been languishing in the High Court. The High Court said, no, we can't get into this. We'll give you compensation, but we can't prosecute you for using a dangerous weapon. The pellet gun case is a simple case. In international law and the guidelines of the Red Cross, in international law, to use a weapon which is indiscriminate is unlawful. All weapons are directly capable of being aimed at the so-called offender. But in the case of the pellet gun, it goes off in a funnel. And so an officer can shoot aiming on, at his level, and the pellets will go up and kill a person in the balcony, a child, and children have been killed in the balconies of buildings just looking at what is happening. So it's indiscriminate. And because it's indiscriminate, in international law, it is banned. But in India, our forces and in Kashmir, our forces merrily use weapons that they are not permitted to use. These and other cases can be taken to the High Court and the Supreme Court. I know it's an uphill task. But still, as of now, maybe a year, 2 years, 3 years down the line, we'll totally give up. But as of now, we are still oriented towards recruiting young lawyers who will fight without compromise, who will take cases to the courts, the criminal courts, the high courts, the Supreme Court, and try and get justice for the huge amount, the unbelievably huge amount of injustice done to the people of Kashmir. And so with that, I stop, again repeating my little request that if you know young men and women who want to use their learning and their talent and their passion to do justice, please identify them and bring them to us. It could be in many areas. It could be in disability law, it could be in women's rights, it could be in environmental law, it could be in torture, execution, disappearances. It could be in any of the branches of human rights. And we are very keen to sort of overcome the deficiencies of HRLN in the past and do good work starting from today onwards. And maybe we could talk to Musaib Umar and see what we can do in that case. It's not too late. The delay is not crippling. And the facts are so stark that it's possible that his case, once we take it up maybe at the High Court or Supreme Court, it is quite possible that historic judgment could come in his case to crush the kind of child sexual abuse that is happening in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Thank you, my friends.
Thank you, sir. Now I would like to invite Miss Kamalpreet Kaur. Over to you, Kamalpreet.
Hi, sir. Actually, I really don't have much to add in this case because many people have already spoken, and I don't. I hope I'm audible to everyone. Okay. Many people have already spoken. I don't know what to add, but when I have to think about, children in Kashmir, and my mind goes to that image of a young toddler who is sitting there with the dead body of his grandfather. Just recently, in the month of August, his grandfather, Bashir Ahmed Khan, was killed. And that toddler actually reminds me of the children in Kashmir. And I believe that when a children's life is shaped by a sense of injustice that the child sees around himself or herself, then there is a tendency to accept the violence that goes around. And the tendency to accept the violence increases, specifically when the people are in the conflict zone, which is there in Kashmir. So I feel when we are talking about children in Kashmir, we have to address the trauma that the child goes through, particularly in the conflict zone. And also, I just want to add is that in schools in Kashmir, they are closed. I mean, schools never really work. Students do not go to schools because there is some shutdown or the other. And in the schools, it is the time where a child can interact with their peers, with other students, and maybe in the schools they can also gain knowledge about many aspects related to sexuality, related to gender. But that child is in Kashmir is denied that basic support system from the school, or even meeting the friends, having a normal hangouts with your friends, with your peers. So I think that denial, lack of awareness, also with the kind of society that we live in, which is highly patriarchal, where family's honor is very important. And if a child is facing sexual abuse within a family or from a imam or from any religious preacher, of course, the pressure increases because the child does not have anybody to talk to or to report to. So I believe when any, because there are many people have already spoken, I don't want to repeat, but of course lawyers need sensitivity to handle, and if there are women lawyers out there, I believe they can make a really good change, and also to educate the parents that this stigma, you have to come out of that stigma. So if we can just take some awareness campaigns in Kashmir or among the families, then maybe tying up with various social organizations, NGOs, then I believe maybe we can at least, that will be a first step to break through that stigma that is associated with sexual abuse that comes from family or otherwise. And yeah, so I believe that's the support system that really we need to create, which the state is of course denying there. And yeah, and I really hope, I mean, because sir had asked me once if I know somebody who can work in Kashmir. So I mean, I of course can't guarantee, but there are young people that I know who are just freshers, so they don't have any experience. But if HRLN is ask them to come and we'll train you, then I believe there will be many young people who will come and who will join. So yeah, so that's what I can say. And I think if those young lawyers can be trained, those fresher lawyer can be trained, then maybe something can come out. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kamalpreet. Now, the final speaker for today's webinar is Mr. Kabir Ali. He's an advocate. Over to you, Kabir.
And Faisal, after this, you're opening the floor for discussion, right?
Yes, sir. At
So
6:15.
Anyone participating can say whatever they like. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Am I audible, Faisal?
Yeah.
Right. Well, it's a... At the beginning, I would say that my purpose of these 5 minutes is not to tell the Kashmiris what they should do and what the problem is. They know the problem far more better than me sitting here in Delhi. But sometimes, just sometimes, it helps to have a little bit of an outside perspective. Now, first thing I'd like to say is to express solidarity with Musab as to what he has gone through. And I would say that what has happened with many of us. When I was a child, apart from my formal education, I was also sent to this madrasa for the religious education. And at the religious education, the second in command to the chief cleric would often, in the garb of wrestling with me, would rub himself against me. Well, after a week of this thing happening, I simply stopped going, and I was belligerent enough to not give a particular reason to the family. And I simply stopped going. Second was, as I was not allowed to play outside much. So I was a bit of an odd fellow occasionally when I would like to go and play with the local friends there in terms of speech and appearance, and pointed out for appreciation and depreciation. So there was an incident once when I was sort of waylaid by 4 of the boys. And I remember it very accurately. They said, look, we've got 18 rupees in our pocket. If you want, you can keep it. Otherwise, we'll do nonetheless what we will do. And then they were sort of distracted by a peeping Tom, and I took one of my slipper and ran away. To retrieve the other slipper, I went to their house and shouted at the top of my lungs, narrating the entire incident, that, look, your boys have been doing this and this and this. My purpose of saying these 2 incidents is twofold. One, of course, to express the solidarity with Musab. Second, to point it out to all the people present in this meeting that this problem of child sexual harassment of either gender is far more common than we think, than we believe. Many of us have gone through at various levels, milder, stronger. What I've gone through is certainly a lot milder than what I've heard so far. But many of us, I mean, my very rough guess is that more than 50% children at some point of time in their life undergoes some sort of sexual harassment. Sexual harassment is just one part of the problem of child rights violation. There are other violations. Nelson Mandela has written extensively on this issue, not on child rights, but he says something like this, that look, if you really have to judge a nation and a society, you don't see how that nation or society is treating its highest civilians, but how they are treating its lowest civilians. And in any society, lowest civilians are the ones which are without power and which are a minority within minority. So if we talk about any society, it's always women and children. We talk about Kashmir in particular, there might be these particular smaller religious sects and so on and so forth. So my first point is that the problem is very widespread, and how our society is, how any society is, how Kashmiri society is judged by Kashmir's treatment of its own minorities, which are its women and children. Second point, Colin once asked a Tibetan friend of mine, and she was a very dear friend, and he said that, look, in the Tibetan society, there are no reproductive rights for women. I've realized, that women don't have access to healthcare, etc., childbirth, protection measures, etc. And her instant response off the bat was this, that look, we've got bigger problems to deal with. I had more interactions with her later to try and understand her perspective. But this answer I've heard a lot from a lot of regions, from my friends in Northeast, from my friends, few as I have, from Kashmir. That when you talk about these issues, they somehow take a secondary priority. And their response is, all right, we know all this, etc., but look, we are going through this. Half the time there is a curfew and this stone pelting going on. What are you talking about, these child rights and women's issues and so on and so forth? I think I agree with Colin in that for a child or for a woman, it really doesn't matter that what is the so-called political situation. Political situation is important, and I'm not denying it's important. But for that child, for Musab, it doesn't matter what's going on and what is their government policy and when is the curfew. What matters for him is does he feel protected in the house of his religious school, the madrasas? Does he feel protected in the house of his uncle? Does he feel protected even in his own house? I mean, a laborer who was toiling away and working hard in 1930, his descendants are still toiling hard in 1970s. And for all your talks of freedom and liberty, it doesn't matter to him who was sitting on the thrones of Delhi and so on and so forth. There is a limitation of this platform. Therefore, I can speak with only so much candor. So my request to my Kashmiri friends is that please do not undermine these issues. For a child, for a woman, what is far more important is how safe and secure they feel in their homes, how much they are allowed to prosper. It is not so much important for them. Also, it should also be more important for the Kashmiri people, for us, if in a manner I count myself as part of the community by some stretch, is that an entire generation of children is going down the drain. Whenever there is a conflict in a society, in any society, and we can safely say that there is a bit of instability and conflict there, people who are always at the receiving end the most, and people who are ignored the most, are the marginalized within that society. So there are these layers of discriminations and disability. So even in Kashmir, despite all the problems and difficulties and violence, people who are suffering the most are women and children. We don't hear about them so much. We don't hear about in the mainstream media that there is domestic violence or children are being brutalized, etc., etc. But I'm absolutely, and so can you be, 100% sure that the children are suffering far more than what grown-up men are suffering in that society. And these children are your future generation. There's no point in getting any concession, winning any battles, having a political development if the next generation, which is supposed to take forward these political development, is not there. It will be destroyed. Coming on to my third point, the legal solution. Much has been spoken by Mr. Gonzalez already, and much of the criticism is answered. And yes, we get it, and we always admit it in almost every meeting that, look, legal solution is not the only solution. Legal solution may not always be the best solution, but it is a solution. And problems and the state of affairs which are there in Kashmir, can we really afford to let go of this legal tool entirely with all its limitations? It is a potent tool. How many tools do we have apart from this? There may be some, but in total, we don't have much. So whatever is available to us, we should make use of it. And there are two things. There are two answers to answer back the criticism of the legal solution. The first is this, which Mr. Gonzalez has said, and other people have also said, that in every institution, in every system, you always have these bright and willing individuals scattered throughout the system. You have a lot of legal practitioners, a lot of people who are part of this system, a lot of judges who are brilliant. And I've experienced it myself in 5 years. I've gone through this cycle of absolute optimism and trust on the legal system, absolute distrust and disillusionment, and making peace with it. So you have these individuals who are scattered throughout the legal system. And these individuals, I really feel sometimes are waiting for an opportunity. There are justices who are just waiting for a case to come and pass an order. They are in minority, they're hard to find, but they are there. So therefore, these people, you can still repose your faith and hope and pray that if the opportunity goes to them, they will give you stellar orders, they will make significant intervention. The second category of people who are never convinced by this argument, and they say, no, there are none, sorry, look at this case and the habeas corpus petitions in the Kashmir and so on and so forth. To them also, even if that is what your outlook is, then you must give a capitalistic state an option to make good the promises, to do things which it offers on paper. So even if you have no trust, you can safely say that, look, we did come to you for our problems. We asked for your help and you didn't. We did file the petition, but it was not taken forward. So both ways. Now, the final question is, which is actually the working part of this entire conference, is how to use the legal system. I somehow feel that after listening to people here, is that there is no particular dearth of solutions. There is no particular dearth of knowledge also, how to use the legal system. It's pretty simple. You use it the way we always do, and what HRL has sort of pioneered, that you go, you gather the facts and evidence, you convert those facts and evidence into petition. So you go and conduct a fact finding with the victims, hear their stories, see what evidence they have to offer, convert it to a legal petition and file it in the court. So I feel, and there's no dearth of law, there are plenty of laws, there's IPC, there's Child Rights Act, there is POCSO, there's Constitution for everything else if you don't have these specific laws. So the problem is just a lack of work from our side. So I think how to use the legal system, we know it already, just we need to put a little more push, bring out some sort of a schedule, scan the papers. Our information is that whenever we come across any case of child abuse or child rights, we have to proactively go and meet them. And they are very distrustful. They are not going to speak, and all those problems would come. And that depends on us, how we are able to convince it, part of our training and our skills. Listen to their stories, convert them into legal cases, and come to court. So 3 things I have said. 1, that the problem is far more widespread. And I'm very careful when I say that it might have something to do with the particular culture and connotation of our community, because you hear such cases of preference for boys in child abuse from Babarnama onwards in several texts. So 1, problem is very widespread. 2, problem cannot be ignored because you have bigger political issues to work on to deal with. 3, despite all its faults, legal system is a viable option, a potent option to use. You can use it because it's potent. You can use it because it actually works sometimes. You can use it, even if it doesn't work, to say it confidently that we have utilized all options available to us. So these are the 3 things I wanted to briefly say on. And I express my solidarity with Musad and everybody else in this conference who would have gone through these difficult problems. I'd be happy to answer if there is any question.
Thank you, Kabir.
Thank you.
If anybody has any question or query, he or she can ask.
Kabir, I must say that was absolutely brilliantly done. Very nicely done. Thank you, Kabir. And if anybody else wants to make some comments before we...
It was amazing, Kabir. Thank you so much for putting it so nicely. I think that's the issue, actually. Like we have options. Like in my case, for example, whichever the lawyers I brought on board privately, none of them actually chose to come up with a solution and file the cancellation of bail application, or at least get some certain things added to the conditions of the bail, which could have somehow ensured that no more children, or he's not having access to any more children So the solutions are there, the options are there. It's about utilizing them, being sincere, and making use of the whatever the little law we have out there.
Is there anybody else who would like to say something before we end?
Yes, sir. Good evening, sir. I am Yamana from University of Kashmir, and I am a third-year law student, and I've got an opportunity to intern with you. Sir, I was very glad and happy to hear all this concern and all this work all of you have done. With Musab, with you, Colin, sir, and all other lawyers in particular. As I'm not having that much knowledge of law, and I'm still a student, but I want to make certain points that I have observed. Like what we lack, like we should adopt a mathematical approach in this. Like we have, like which policies we must adopt, we should be mathematical in that. We must formulate certain policies that are really effective. For example, if we talk about, like, we have role of police, like how can we curb, how can we curb the abuse of police and make into a better use? We must concentrate on that. As Kabir said, that there's a wide stretch problem. This problem is wide stretch, and plus in Kashmir, certain issues like women right issues like violence and domestic rights are being they are being overshadowed under the garb of conflict. So we must basically split these two things, the conflict and the women rights and human rights issues, because we must constitute a simple body concentrating on victimology, a victim perspective, and hear their issues, so that we could really use law in a better way and do a research in effectively using them. Thank you. This was all from me.
Thank you. Anybody else want?
Hi, this is Oindrala. I'm an advocate from HRL in Delhi. Like Kabir said, I express solidarity with everyone present here. Having been very close to victims of child sexual abuse, I might not fully understand, but I empathize and I understand. I have a very interesting. I don't have, as Kabir has already laid it down and Colin sir has already spoken. I just have one observation. It is, and I'm sure it's an observation that everyone has taken a note of. It's interesting how these cases of child sexual abuse, whether that was a child sexual abuse that happened in the Boston church case, or whether it was Larry Nassar, who was the coach of the gymnastics team, or whether it's child sexual abuse in paramilitary forces like the CRPF, or whether it was that Gurmeet Ram Rahim, who was self-titled messenger of God. All these cases of mass child sexual abuse have such a strong systemic support that has allowed all these people to go on for so long as they have. Even Azad Sheikh and like I named all the previous convicted rapists here. It's very interesting to know how they have gone on for 25-30 years and how they're still going on, and this is such a rampant systematic failure. And also the fact that the entire system has supported them, that they have people who've procured kids for them. They have people who are specifically appointed to go to those particular areas and select children and pick them up and select women and bring them to them. So this is such a huge, it's not just that one person or not just 2-3 people around him. This is an entire systemic failure that I've observed through all of these cases. There's a pattern here. There's a very common thread here in all these cases. That's just the observation I had to make. And if Musab has anything to add to that, or Kabir or Colin sir have something to add to that, that would be great.
Thanks, Andrea. So we should wrap up this meeting. We're already late by 1 hour almost. So thanks everybody. Good night. And we'll see you in another webinar. We're organizing in coming days the other webinar. I hope the people will join us for that webinar as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sir, you're muted.
Am I muted? No.
Musab,
Yeah,
Colin sir has gone.
No.
Now we can speak more frankly, but really, it's sorry that such a mishandling, not mishandling, blame is not on particular individual, but I'm sorry, with human rights things, sometimes we become a little insensitive. The way you spoke, I was also reminded, that, okay, I've gone through a little bit of this.
I'm sorry, I know it can trigger sometimes.
Yeah, but it's a big problem. Yeah, we should take it up. And frankly, I feel, don't be offended anyone, but I feel that in Muslim communities, this thing with boys, I think it has some cultural connotation, because I've read about it a lot in all these historical document account. Babar Nama talks about it in detail, how it was a common thing in Afghanistan and parts of India. So it's a big problem.
Of course, it is.
Yes, sir. I'm trying to say that we have to move that cancellation of the bail application. And Wasim could have immediately moved in the court and said that this person is threatening me, when he can threaten a lawyer, that he can threaten the victims. And immediately the bail would be cancelled.
Right.
Yeah, he didn't.
I'll get in touch with Musab on this issue. So I'll take up this brief with him.
And you also mentioned when you were making your argument that the last lawyer has left the case only because of the threat.
No. I'm not saying he left the case because of the threat. We found it extremely difficult working with him. Simple word. Yeah. So I chose to move on, not him leaving the case. Yeah, because with the pandemic thing also, he completely disappeared, and this case needs someone who will chase us, not the other way around. Like I get sick and tired of it sometimes. So I need someone, giving me confidence regularly and telling me, no, we're gonna make it. We're gonna do it. Not the other way around, that I have to constantly ask, call and if a lawyer is if your lawyer is unreachable, what's the point of even paying him?
Right. So Musab, today I was just talking to Colin sir. He is a little busy, so I'll fix the meeting with. It will be you, me, and Colin sir.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. So when do you think it's gonna happen? Because I'm
try to
on weekdays. Weekdays is impossible for me.
You can. I'll get in touch with you over this WhatsApp.
Musab, these days you are there in Kashmir?
No,
I'm
not.
in Stockholm.
No. Okay.
Yeah.
Right, guys. So we should disband for now. Right. Bye, Faisal, Musab, Andrila, Kawalpreet.
Bye, Kabir.
Bye, guys. Bye, Faisal.
Bye.
All right, Faisal. Then we'll be in touch on WhatsApp. Okay.
We'll be in touch WhatsApp. I was just talking to Colin sir.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll organize this small meeting over this case.
थोड़ा proactively लो यार फैसल, बहुत पुराना केस है.
Brief was not with me. That was the problem.
नहीं मुसाब पहले भी HR लेन को approach कर चुका है.
No. He didn't. We were initially we started this case. We raided the premises.
मुझे याद है. Somehow I was involved in this case. I don't remember.
You were also.
तो भाई थोड़ा 2-3 गलती है यार. वो इतना bluntly बता रहा है वहां पे कि उसको जैसे ही उसने वो दिखाया था, उसको तो टर्न करके बेल कैंसिल करवा देना चाहिए था और प्रोटेक्शन मांग लेना चाहिए था सबके लिए.
The problem ये थी यार कि ये हैंडल जो केस कर रहे थे वो फैसल साहब ने वो फाइल रिटेन की थी.
अच्छा.
फाइल वाज नॉट.
कादरी साहब ने.
जी. Yes. So Wasim is the associate of Faisal Saab.
नहीं देखो एक और बात है फैसल, ब्लंटली ऑन योर फेस, कि कोई भी फाइल रिटेन करेगा है तो ये वायलेशन, ठीक है, उसको तो कहीं ना कहीं फॉलो करना ही पड़ेगा यार। अब ये कहना कि उसने रिटेन की, इसने रिटेन की, ठीक है,
There has been
कोई
some.
नहीं, थोड़ा इसमें मेरे हिसाब से मैंने तुम्हें ये केस 17-17 में बताया था।
ये केस हमें डिस्कस किया था हमने यार एक बार 16 में 2016 में we
16
discussed
में
this
बताया
case.
था।
16 में हमने डिस्कस किया था ये केस। तो ये उसी के साथ आया था ना, फिरोज जो हमारा केस था वो रोहिंग्या का।
हाँ 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 हाँ।
तो ये दोनों केस एक ही साल फाइल हुए थे दोनों, मुसाहब का भी और वो भी।
ठीक है चलो कोई नहीं, मैं भी हूँ अगर कोई हेल्प चाहिए हो इसमें, ठीक है।
श्योर। पहले मैं मुसाहब से थोड़ा सा बात कर लूँ।
नहीं हाँ तुम बात कर लो, और मुझे
हाँ।
लगता है काफी लोग हैं इसमें अभी, तो आई थिंक
राइट
पर्सनली केस के बारे में कुछ और बात करना चाह रहे हो तो अलग से कर लेना।
ठीक आई टॉक टू हिम फर्स्ट।
अल्लाह हाफिज, बाय बाय।
चलो खुदा हाफिज।
Hello.
Musab.
Yeah. Anything else?
No. I'll get in touch with you. I'll text you on WhatsApp or we can talk on WhatsApp.
Yeah, perfect.
ठीक है?
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thanks. So I'll leave. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you. Flip, meeting is over. Hi, meeting is over. Successfully, it's over. So what I want to know is